I want to welcome all of you and thank you for being here with us. Welcome to Skyline Community Church, United Church of Christ. For those of you who've never been, we're an open and affirming, green, inclusive, progressive faith community. We are very much aligned with the critical issues that are at stake with our sponsors this evening. And so we're so glad that you're here because there's so much at stake within the very diverse community of Alameda County. And we get the democracy that we participate in. So thank you for participating, everyone. I want to thank our candidates for being here on very short notice. I want to thank our moderator. I want to thank our sponsors. Raise your hand, sponsors. I want to thank the team of people that helped to make this happen. So raise your hands. And very important note, restrooms, if you need them. There's one right across the way. They're gender neutral. The other one, see the light there? You go down the stairs, open up the door, take a right, and then take another right. And there's another restroom. If anyone needs help, just raise your hand. And with that, I'm now going to introduce and turn it over to our moderator.
But first, we're going to do the choosing of who gets to go first.
I have no idea what she has in her hands.
So give Jennifer back her. Yeah. Okay.
What's the method?
Lori's going to choose.
I'm going to choose, and I have no idea what she has in her hand. Okay,
I have.
Okay, this one.
Okay. So it's whose name? Jennifer, you go first.
Okay.
So that's how we decided that having this randomly was the way to go. So thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for being here and remind you that this is an election for a 4-year term and it starts in January of 2025. In the kind of unlikely event that no candidate receives 50% of the vote in this election, the top 2 candidates will appear on the ballot in November. And a special welcome to people who are joining us on Zoom. If you're on Zoom and you have questions you'd like to have included in today's forum, please type them into the Zoom chat. For those that are here in person, please write your questions on the file cards. There are some in the back. I'm going to add a personal request. If you're doing them on the card, please print them neatly, because if I can't read it, it's not going to get asked. And one final note about the questions is the sooner you get them in, the more likely they are to be asked. And that actually is not the final note. I'm going to say we probably won't get to all of the questions, but I'm going to do my best to ensure that we have a wide variety of topics. So here are some of the key ground rules. To keep the discussion flowing, candidates are expected to keep answers to 2 minutes. And we have timers here in the front, and they give a 30-second warning. And then a blue card means stop. There are no separate rebuttals. If a candidate chooses, they may use some of their 2-minute time response to address a previously asked question. We're going to switch up the order. And at the closing, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a final statement. So we start with opening statements. Ms. Esteen.
Thank you so much, Helen. And thank you, Skyline Community Church, for hosting this event. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight in person and to all who are attending on Zoom. It is quite an honor to be with you for our probably final in-person candidate forum. And, you know, I want to acknowledge that we have had a very exciting race. And we've also had, I think, a beautiful Alameda County. And this is about the future. Our past has been governed by our incumbent, and I want to acknowledge his service and also say that if things were going perfectly, I would not be running. I am a psychiatric registered nurse and a public health nurse, and I am ready to have the resources I need to do my job and to do it well. But right now, our county is struggling. Poverty increased by 9% last year. The number of unhoused people in our community continues to increase, and we are in need of care, housing, services, and dignified jobs for everyone who lives here. But unfortunately, because of policy decisions that have been made over the last few decades, we don't have enough housing to go around. The cost of living has continued to skyrocket while wages have not kept up. And though that is not something our county has direct control over, we can absolutely help to make sure that people have the resources they need to make it. And the untimely passing of Supervisor Wilma Chan meant that we lost our sole champion on the board, who was a true advocate for the poor. I look forward to being a person who comes in as a public servant in my current career, and looking forward to being a public servant who advocates beyond the bedside for one patient at a time, but instead for our entire county of 1.6 million, because that is what public service is. So thank you all so much for listening tonight.
So I'm going to ask that people hold applause because it's going to take time away. At the very end, we'll have a chance for a lot of applause, but Ms. Miley.
Yes, so good evening. Thank you all for coming out. I want to thank folks for holding this candidates forum. Thank Pastor Lori. And I'm not a stranger to Skyline Community Church. I've been here a number of times. In fact, the last time I was here, I participated in the ceremony that married Amy Fitzgerald and Kamika Dunlap a number of years ago. And I've attended a number of community meetings in this area because I was the city council person for this community, working on a broad array of issues that affected the quality of life up here in the Skyline Hills. So it's real great to be here this evening for this candidates forum. Some of you know I'm running once again for the Board of Supervisors. I really feel there needs to be experience, needs to be institutional knowledge, there needs to be someone who has relationships, not just locally, but throughout the region, someone that has the understanding of county government and the ability to work with folks to make things happen. There are a lot of complex issues we're dealing with, from mental health to homelessness to affordable housing to the rise in crime. It's just so many things. And working on these issues, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. The pandemic was a colossal undertaking in terms of what we had to do to address the many issues that confronted us as a result of the pandemic. I'm running to continue to bring that seasoned, responsible leadership. I still have a very strong passion for public service. I'm looking forward to providing the type of leadership on the Board of Supervisors, or basically a new Board of Supervisors, in my next term of office. So once again, thank you so very much for your time and consideration.
Thanks. So we're going to move to questions, and Mr. Miley's going to go first on this first question. Lack of affordable housing is a serious problem throughout the county. What, in your estimation, can realistically be done, and how quickly?
Yes, we've been working on affordable housing, and I'm confident we'll continue to work on it. Measure A1 provided nearly $600 million for affordable housing. For every measure $8, it leveraged another $7, and we produced over 4,000 housing units throughout the county in terms of affordable housing. And that's one reason why, as the member of the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority for the 9 Bay Area County region, I'm leading the effort in Alameda County for another bond measure that would bring in about $1 billion for affordable housing, for production, preservation, and protection to keep people housed. I think that's extremely important. That bond measure will be on the ballot in November. So it dovetails with what we did with Measure A1. We would have gone out to reauthorize Measure A1, but for our desire to be part of the regional effort, because homelessness and affordable housing just isn't an issue in Oakland, Alameda County. It's a regional issue. The cost of housing is trending towards $1 million for a unit. So we need to have the resources to build more housing, to have more supply of housing. That's fundamentally important. We have found through our Home Together plan, a $2.8 billion plan, that we've provided more permanent supportive housing for the homeless. But despite that, we have more people becoming unsheltered than we are providing housing for. That's why we need more housing. That's what our staff has pointed out. We also need more resources to provide wraparound services for folks as well. all of that works in tandem in order to address this crisis that we find. We haven't always had this crisis, but we find ourselves in this crisis. And to work ourselves through this crisis that requires knowledge, accountability, and steadfastness. And that's what I bring to the job. Thank you.
Dean, would you like the question again, or?
No, I think I got it. The question is what can be done quickly about affordable housing? And what
Okay.
else?
Realistically.
Realistically and
And how
quickly.
quick.
Thank you for that. So realistically and quickly, the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority was given its authority by legislation that happened in 2019, enabling legislation from our state legislature. It's 2024 right now, and we haven't got the money nor the housing. So to say quickly, this is not the quick approach. Our county has funding, and if we only try to build our way out of this housing crisis, we're going to stay in this housing crisis. It doesn't have to be in always, but what I'm hearing is that this has always been an issue. It's not true. Our county has not always had almost 10,000 people that were unhoused. In 2017, we had less than 5,000 people, but the problem is doubled. We have to have solutions that are realistic and quick. And that means that we need to take the funding we have right now. We need to preserve currently affordable housing. We need to make sure that we are protecting people who are housed so they stay housed. That means renters and homeowners who need assistance, whether it be an additional amount of money per month in the form of a potential stipend, like a universal basic income pilot program that are proven to work, or if they need some other kind of help, we have to offer it right now. In addition, there are numerous vacant units all over this county and all over the Bay Area that are not housing people. Vacancies are problematic. And if we continue to allow vacant units to go without some kind of acknowledgement, at the very least, counting would be helpful. A renter registry and a database of all rental units in the county would give us the information that we need to address the unhoused problem right now, quickly and realistically. There are a number of solutions we can take, and it's not only waiting for a bond measure to go on the ballot in November, hope and pray that voters say yes to it, and then raise the money in another 2 years.
This next question goes to you first. So public safety is a top of mind concern for residents throughout the county. The county runs a wide variety of programs that all work on different aspects of public safety, from mental health programs to the probation department, the jail, the public defenders and district attorney's offices. What can be done to ensure that all of these programs do their best possible work?
Yeah, this is great. The county is responsible for the entire criminal legal system. And in order for these programs to work well together, there has to be solid communication, solid cooperation. And in addition to the county, we need to be talking and communicating with the 14 cities that the county oversees so that as each city is having issues, we can address them in unison. Some of the cities in the county utilize our sheriff's department as their staff because we contract them out for police services. But in other cities, we need to be working together. Like in the city of Oakland, it's interesting that the highway patrol was just sent in from the state to come and help with our crime issue, but we didn't get resources from the sheriff. And I question why our county isn't having more of an impact and an integration with our city locally. Because, you know, like people say, when you go to work, you climb the ladder of command as you escalate your issues. But to go from the city to the governor means we skip the county. I don't understand why that happened. I think that in order for us to really have a systematic approach to crime and public safety, just like with housing, we need to take a kitchen sink approach. You know, you throw everything at it. We need to have multiple tracks moving all at the same time. Having this extra law enforcement support is helpful, but it's a Band-Aid solution. It's temporary. We saw in Richmond that they heavily invested in violence prevention, and they have now reported the lowest murder rate in history, except for 1 year. In Oakland, however, we've seen the murder rate double at the same time that violence prevention was losing funding. So in our county, we have to be, I think, the wise folks, the adult in the room, so to speak, to say the solutions we need are to invest in people who are at risk and communities that are at risk, and by providing services. Running a 30% staff shortage in the county means that we cannot actually do that. And not having that solid communication and cooperation and collaboration with our cities also means that they're going to continue to go over our head to the governor instead of coming to us.
Well, first of all, the county is a separate jurisdiction. It doesn't oversee the cities. There's separate municipal governments that have their own elected officials. We work in collaboration with the cities. The sheriff's department has been steadfast with our new sheriff, by the way, who has endorsed me, handling mandated responsibilities out of the jail. We all acknowledge that there have been issues out of the jail, and that's where the sheriff has put her time, her energy, and her resources, as opposed to doing things that are not part of her mandated responsibilities. We have worked to establish a public safety corridor throughout Alameda County, going from Contra Costa County to Santa Clara County, working with the other cities, working with our allied law enforcement agencies, working with other counties. That is underway. In order to have all of our various components, and it's just not the public safety components, it's also social services and healthcare, and both of those agencies are about $2 billion together in terms of providing resources. We need to be looking upstream with intervention on prevention. We need to be doing intervention, and we need to have law enforcement. We need to have a balanced approach. I voted to ensure that we'd have a smaller juvenile hall. I voted to have more alternatives to detention. We've done all of that to ensure that we're providing services both upstream as well as intervention, because no one is free of not having made some mistakes in their lives. But we also need to have strong law enforcement. The governor provided additional law enforcement because there wasn't the resources from the sheriff's department in order to make that happen. But all of the allied agencies, law enforcement agencies, were working as a task force to try to address the problem of lawlessness that we see in our society. And in addition, we're looking at additional laws that can be reformed that would help us ensure better quality of life and public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question goes to you first. So it's what do you see as the best way to care for people with mental health issues?
Well, the best way to care for people with mental health issues is to provide care in the community. And the thing is, with Prop 1, it will take money out of mental health and put it into housing. We need both. We need housing and we need treatment. We need to have both peer-to-peer treatment. We need to have early intervention. We need to have prevention. We need to have community-oriented treatment. And we need to have the resources to ensure that that's happening. You know, it takes 3 votes on the Board of Supervisors to make something happen. I attempted, and I'm confident with the new board, I'll be able to succeed in this, attempted to get money from our reserves, our designation accounts, and our escrow accounts, of which we're going to be looking at next month to try to put into community mental health. The board did not support that at the time, but there's a new board, and I'm confident that the new board would support that because we need to have more facilities. We need to have more clinicians. It takes time to hire clinicians. We have incentives for clinicians. We need to make sure that that's happening. We need to provide more resources for community-based organizations for their staff so they have the requisite folks to provide clinical services as well. All of that's part of it. And I think that helps us to address the mental health crisis, because I think it is a crisis that we're dealing with in our community. Additionally, by doing that, if we're addressing that effectively, then that will also prevent folks from ending up in Santa Rita jail as well, because we're putting more into the community. Furthermore, I support care courts so that we have compulsory mandatory treatment. I support Senate Bill 43 so that we have conservatorship so we can get people who need treatment into treatment, because people who are on the streets are not going to get well if they're out on the streets. So I think those are the types of things we need to be doing relative to addressing the mental health crisis that our society is experiencing presently.
Oh,
Yeah. You know, I have been a psychiatric registered nurse my entire nursing career, public health nurse, and working with people who have severe and persistent mental illness, and working for the first 5 years of my career in the psychiatric emergency room at San Francisco General Hospital really opened my eyes to some of the deficiencies in our public health system. When people's entryway into seeking care is in the back of a police car wearing handcuffs, it makes it very difficult for people to, I mean, if you have a heart attack, you don't get arrested. Why, if you're having a psychiatric crisis, do you have to go with police? It's stigmatizing and it can be a barrier. But also, we have other barriers. Here in Alameda County, you know, I've served on the Alameda Health System Board for 3 years. I was the vice president of the board last year. And if people want mental health care in this county, they're waiting 6 months. That is a long time to wait for care. We have got to ensure that the 30% staffing shortage that our county is currently experiencing is eliminated. We do not have enough staff to provide care to people right now, even though those positions are fully funded. And sometimes I wonder, like, if we save the money on 3,000 jobs, where do the salary savings get spent? Where's that money actually going? So we have to make sure that the county is utilizing our resources that we currently have in an appropriate manner. But if people are waiting 6 months to get care in the community, then we have false promises. As a psych nurse, I know that people deserve to have care at all levels. And, you know, right now I have a caseload of 54 people who are in locked unit in San Francisco and 26 people in Napa State Hospital. My job is to bring them back to the community. But what's actually missing are community-based resources. We don't have enough spaces for people to take folks home when they're ready. And we have to make those more robust. In addition, on the county level, I look forward to working with members of the state legislature and our governor so that we can make some adjustments to Medi-Cal, because Medi-Cal billing makes it complicated for people to actually get transitional care as they are leaving the hospital.
Thank you. Next question goes directly to you first. So in an ideal world, all of the county's programs would be fully funded. Given the reality of limited funding, how do you both maximize the money available and balance the widely varied programs? And what influences those decisions?
Yeah, this is a great question. Of course, we have limited resources, but we also have abundant resources. Our county has a $4 billion budget, and right now, 25% of that is spent jailing people, putting, you know, folks in jail. 25,000 people every year cycle in and out of our county jail. 12,000 of them spend less than 7 days in jail. Sometimes I wonder, you know, I'm not a legal scholar, I'm a nurse, but 7 days in jail plus cycling in and out means that we are spending a lot of money to do the same thing over and over again. And I don't know if that's the best use of our resources. So, you know, I really want to make an assessment of a lot of the programs that are running in the county so that we can understand, are we actually getting our money's worth? Are we actually getting what contract providers say they're going to give? And our county jail has a medical system that is a contract provider that got a no bid contract renewal last year for $300 million. So I really want to make a lot of assessments that become open to the public so that we can understand the resources we have right now, the $4 billion, is it being spent the way that our taxpayers say? Because the county government is a business, just like any other business. And if we have expectations for businesses to run well and efficiently, we should expect the same from our county government. But right now, people are asking for transparency, and we don't understand. And because it's our tax dollars, we deserve transparency. So in an ideal world, we would have perfect transparency in addition to limitless resources. But this is a world where we've had the same elected leadership for 24 years, influencing whether or not we've had transparency, influencing whether or not we've actually had the resources being allocated in the ways that serve people, so that instead of having an increasing unhoused population, it's decreasing, so that we can start to offer the right amount of services in the community.
Smiley.
Yes. Well, county's budget's $4 billion. And we've run a deficit every year. Last year was, 50, 60 million. And so we use the resources to balance the budget. That's the first thing. Secondly, the state is projecting a $70 billion deficit. And often the state balances its budget on the backs of counties and cities. So we have to be prepared for that. Thirdly, the county has a AAA bond rating. So that allows us to borrow money and do other things for capital improvements and other things like that. We need to be comfortable that we can continue that. We have designation accounts, reserve accounts, and escrow accounts. We're going to be examining those accounts to determine whether or not we need to move any of the money around to look at some of the critical issues that need to be addressed. That's coming up next month. That's something that we've been wanting to do, and I've been leading that effort as the president of the Board of Supervisors. We have other resources. Measure W passed, but it's under litigation. Once that litigation is won, which I anticipate it will be won, we'll have, right now, we probably have close to $500 million that we can use for various services. We have Measure C, once again, a childcare measure for early childhood education and development. That measure is under litigation. We'll have those resources to spend as well. So we need to constantly be looking at the stability of the county. We have seen other counties and jurisdictions go bankrupt because they haven't taken into consideration the impact of measures coming down from Sacramento and how that has an effect on counties and cities. And we're often looking at that. During the pandemic, we did a lot. We got a lot of resources out into the community, to provide services for food, for housing, for rental assistance, for other things to ensure that people wouldn't suffer.
Thank you. This next question goes to you first. So every 10 years, the 5 supervisorial districts are redrawn so that each district is approximately equal in population, that redistricting process after each census. The Board of Supervisors currently handles the redistricting. They're in charge. How do you think the recent redistricting process went, including the final district lines? And would you support an independent citizens commission doing the redistricting as happens statewide in California and in communities throughout the state?
So I'll start with the last question.
Okay.
What I support is a hybrid system. We could have total independence. We could have the Board of Supervisors doing it, or we could have a hybrid. I wanted the board to have a hybrid approach. The board voted to make the responsibility of the entire Board of Supervisors. So once again, you need to have 3 votes to make something happen at the board. The board did not vote for total independence. Under a hybrid approach, we would have had a commission that would have looked at various maps, made a determination that they would have submitted maybe 3 or 4 maps. These are the maps we want the board to consider, and those are the maps we would have considered to adopt in terms of the district, as opposed to the board taking total responsibility to come up with the redistricting lines. It's important that we look at how we're drawing the lines. My district that I represent goes from Oakland over to Pleasanton and includes the unincorporated area. When you start moving lines around, that has an impact in other parts of the county as well. So it's always an issue of trying to ensure that there's equal representation, there's community of interest, and that the maps can withstand legal scrutiny. So I don't support total independence, nor do I support the board doing it on its own. What I do support is a hybrid approach. That way we have a commission of citizens that can give us a map, a few maps, and then the board can decide of those few maps, which ones we would adopt at that point. I think that's much more serving the public interest. And that's the approach I would like to support.
Yeah. Before I talk about redistricting, I do want to state that as we talk about budgets, deficits, surpluses, and what have you, there's still $156 million of unobligated ARPA money in our county's coffers that will have to go back to the federal government on December 31st. This is happening while people are waiting for mental health care, while people are in the street, in the cold and in the rain. Transparency matters. So does fiscal responsibility. So when it comes to redistricting, another issue around transparency, on the ballot right now, we are deciding whether or not we will look at matching language for recalls. Will we match the state and their process, or will we do what we already do independently? And the supervisors have asked for this to be on the ballot because they want our language to match the state. So when it comes to census to redistricting, we should also match the state. We should have independent redistricting. The people of our community spoke. And the question wasn't, do we want a hybrid model? The question was, do we want representative bodies? Do we want a contiguous geographical map that makes sense so that people in the Tri-Valley are not split, so that people in one city are not split. Like Pleasanton is a small town and it's split. Cherryland is a very small area and it's also split. The unincorporated community is split. The people of our community spoke and offered a lot of input. And because the supervisors took up a question that was unrelated to what these maps look like, but whether or not we're going to have a certain kind of process, the people were ignored. And we ended up with lines that are geographically, we have weird boundaries. We skipped the entire city of San Leandro going between Oakland and the unincorporated community. That's not geographically contiguous. And communities of interest are split because of that. I think we deserve to have fair process, and I think that means community input and community driven.
Thank you. The next question is about unincorporated areas. The county residents in unincorporated areas get all of their local government services from the county, including land use, code enforcement, and public works. That's just, but there's lots more. Are there ways in which the county could improve those services?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As a resident of Ashland, of our unincorporated community, I absolutely believe that we can have the county doing better by us. We have business owners who've talked to me about delays in getting permits, and other business owners who talked about being streamlined in getting permits. And, and asking them, well, what do you think was the difference in your process? They had their opinions, but they all kind of came down to the same thing, whether or not they had personal relationships with people who work in the office. And I think that that is abhorrent, and that is not what our county government or any official body should be doing when it comes down to business and serving people. Everybody should get served equally, and everybody should get served equitably. But, yesterday I was walking through Cherryland, and, as I walked down the street, the sidewalk disappeared. And at a certain point, I'm walking in gravel. At a certain point, I was walking in mud. And, we have really beautiful communities in the unincorporated area, but we're not getting the services that we would get if we had a city council or a mayor for the last, however many decades. Instead, we get what people think of as an afterthought, or it feels like an afterthought. The members of the community tell me all the time, they're like, we really want consistency. We want to know that enforcement is consistent. We want to know that our sidewalks are consistent. And we like the idea of having a representative who is a member of our unincorporated community, who understands our needs and who is one of us.
Smiley?
Sure. So when I became the county supervisor, people definitely said that they felt the unincorporated area was treated as a second-class citizen, and they felt that they were not represented. So I wanted to make sure that we did the job of representing the unincorporated area. And because I was a city council person, I had a lot of experience representing the community and delivering municipal services as a city council person. So I used that experience in the unincorporated area. One thing we did was we had the Eden Air Livability Initiative, where we had hundreds and hundreds of people involved in coming up with a shared vision for the unincorporated area around governance, around some major projects like the Ashland Youth Center, like the Cherryland Community Center, like trying to create both the Eden MAC and the Fairview MAC so that people could have more of a say in local governance and local decision-making, like putting unincorporated people on the planning commission, because that wasn't done in the past. So there are many things that we did in order to provide more representation from the unincorporated area in the decision-making process. I spend a lot of time with my staff in the unincorporated area to represent the unincorporated area, to ensure that the unincorporated area, if it were a city, it'd be the fourth largest city in the county. Once again, I began that whole effort. I made sure that county government people understood that we expect the same quality of service in the unincorporated area that any municipality would provide to a city from its staff. And we can't have our staff thinking of the unincorporated area as, an afterthought. It has to be prominent in their minds and their decision making. So those are all important things. And we've done that journey. We've built up the Ashland community collaborative, the Ashland Lane Community Collaborative. That was an effort to bring together both the community-based organizations, government, et cetera, to work on issues in the unincorporated area. We put together the basic needs that provided additional resources in the unincorporated area. We did all of that as well. We saved the Chamber of Commerce and we expanded that into the Eden Castro Valley Chamber of Commerce. Those are some of the things we've done.
Thank you. Next question goes to you first. So the Board of Supervisors is working currently on implementing recent legislation about the oversight of county sheriffs. That's AB 1185 for those who are in the know. So what are your priorities for the selection of the new Sheriff Oversight Board and for the Oversight Board itself?
Yes. So I've been consistently saying I support 1185. I worked with former Supervisor Richard Valle to bring that forth. I support oversight and an office of Inspector General. What I don't support at the moment is independent counsel. But I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. So the good is to have oversight. The good is to have an office of Inspector General. I support the Board of Supervisors making those appointments because I'm not going to give away my authority and my responsibility. That's what people have hired me to do, to make appointments, and I do that. Additionally, I support the need to ensure that both the oversight body and the Office of Inspector General have the resources in order to do the type of job that they need to do. We have been working on that for quite a while in terms of careful and deliberative citizen engagement around this so we could receive input. Supervisor Vine, who chairs the Public Protection Committee, and then Supervisor Marquez, who chairs the Public Safety Committee, of which I serve on, have led that effort. A lot of times you give deference to your colleagues because when you're one of five, you want to work collaboratively with your colleagues to move an agenda. We had to make sure that two of our colleagues who are new to the Board of Supervisors were brought up to speed on that. We needed to make sure that the new sheriff, gave us her input on what she felt needed to happen around this as well. And then we need to proceed forward with putting in place oversight and the Office of Inspector General. I do anticipate that that's going to be coming. I'm very confident it's going to be coming because we all want to see that happen. And it's better that it happened, that the board does it, because if we have to make some tinkering with it, we can amend an ordinance faster than if it's on the ballot and requires a whole ballot measure to try to amend or to change, because then that ballot measure might fail or it might be successful, but still it would take longer.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think this is incredibly important. You know, someone died in our jail 10 days ago. They had been in custody for 28 hours. We absolutely have to have oversight, and we need it immediately. This is another example of a delay that is unacceptable. If we can talk about the pandemic moving us into urgent action, we have to talk about the deaths of members of our community in the jail when they are in the custody of medical providers and sheriff's deputies as an emergency. And we have to act with rapid, urgent action so that we understand what the problems are and prevent them from happening ever again. If you are dying in 28 hours, it's because of process and protocol. It's because procedures are not in place where people are getting looked at and examined and spoken to in a timely fashion. As a registered nurse, the minute I saw that someone had died that quickly, I knew that it was a process issue. If you're in a hospital, it's called a sentinel event. Everybody gathers, every administrator gathers when a sentinel event happens, when someone dies in our care, so we can figure out what went wrong. That's the kind of urgent action that should be happening at the jail. And without this independent oversight, it is not happening. The scrutiny is simply not there. So my priorities would be to have civilian body only, no retired law enforcement officers. You have to be a resident of our county, not some other county in the Bay Area. So you have a vested interest here and you're a taxpayer here. It has to have independent counsel because right now it is the county council's job to represent any county staff. That means they already represent the sheriff's deputies. We're talking about independent counsel and oversight to represent the people who've been harmed, the members of our community. That is why independent counsel matters so much. So It has to be urgent. It's already been 3 years that we've been waiting for the creation of this body. The time is now.
Thank you. You get this next question then. Alameda County's public health system is a crucial safety net for many of the county's residents. What investments are needed to allow the health system to continue and to serve this vital role?
Oh yeah, this is great. You know, I'm a public health nurse, so this feels like it's part of my my wheelhouse. Um, right now, if you want primary care in this county, you're behind 10,000 people in line. That is a huge amount of folks to wait for primary care. And that means that people don't have access to preventative health care. The old saying is true, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Additionally, if we value our AAA bond rating here in the county, then we would recognize that investing in preventative care in the long run is a very solid investment. We get more return when our community is healthy. St. Rose Hospital is a vital resource in the South County, but St. Rose Hospital has been in financial trouble for many, many years. And St. Rose Hospital has come to the county and the state looking for money to bail them out of their financial problem year over year. This year alone, they got $17 million from the state and another $7 million from our county. That's a lot. And right now, our Alameda Health System has been working. Eden Health District did a feasibility study to see what would be the best option for saving St. Rose. Alameda Health System has been partnering with them in this endeavor and has offered to share our electronic health record and to partner with St. Rose in deep ways so that we can share providers. The people at St. Rose Hospital have asked for the potential purchase and sale of the hospital to go to a public bid. Even those business leaders know that you need to bid for contracts. So I think that actually St. Rose Hospital is one of the huge opportunity areas that our county can get into to secure our public health system. And I think we need a deeper investment in making sure that medical providers, psychiatric providers, social workers can work in our public health system so that we can continue to serve people and expand services.
Myla.
Yes. Well, ultimately, the county is responsible for the delivery of health care in the county. We can't delegate that away. That's why we set up the authority. And the hospital authority, the Alameda Health Systems, over the years, it's had financial challenges. And one of the reasons I put forth Measure A back in 2004 was to provide more money for our health system. That measure passed. I also led the effort to have it reauthorized. It raises over $100 million annually for our health system. It's one of the most unique efforts in the whole state. But in addition, our health department, or rather our health agency, has grown over the years. It's $1 billion agency. I've seen it grow. Under that agency, we have the Office of Homeless Care and Coordination. So there's many things that we're putting into that agency to continue to provide delivery of health care. I would anticipate that when we win Measure W, we're going to take some of those resources and put into mental health, because as I said, Prop 1 passes, we can't afford to have mental health diminish in terms of the delivery of prevention, early intervention, in terms of those services for mental health. We need to continue that happening as well. We are working to ensure that St. Rose continues to be a vital hospital. We've provided funding for St. Rose annually to make sure it's saved. When San Leandro Hospital was going to go out of existence, we supported that to become part of Alameda Health Systems. So we saved that hospital. So we're always working with our bargaining units, the bargaining units for the hospitals and others, to ensure that we can have quality health services throughout the county, but do it in a fiscally responsible manner so that it does not bankrupt the county.
So this next question goes to you first. Proposition 1 on this March ballot promises more money for building mental health facilities, but it also reallocates some of the money the county currently gets for providing mental health services. How do you propose to respond to this? if we want to keep mental health services at their current level, where would the money come from?
Yeah, so I've already been talking about that. I didn't know it was going to be a question, but we need housing. The state recognizes we need housing, and I don't fault the governor for wanting to have more money into housing. I probably wouldn't have taken it out of mental health. I probably would have looked for somewhere else to get the funding for housing. But nonetheless, if Prop 1 passes, there'll be, and keep in mind, Prop 1 is about $6 to $7 billion. Our bond measure for the entire region is going to be anywhere from 10 to $20 billion. So our bond measure is a real big deal because Prop 1 is only about 6 billion for the entire state. Where we're going to get additional resources would be Measure W. So we could shore up the mental health so that we don't go in reverse, have diminution in services. Also, as I pointed out, we're going to be looking at our escrow accounts, our designation accounts, and our reserve accounts, so we can see whether or not there are accounts that I feel are antiquated, and we take funds from those to put into mental health to shore it up as well. But we need to do this judiciously, because once again, we don't want to see the county suffer financially in terms of our stability, in terms of our financial and fiscal stability. So we need to look at that very carefully. I think that's another thing that we'll continue to do. Additionally, each year we've seen, despite COVID, we saw sales tax continue to rise. So with Measure A, we see additional funds coming in from sales tax. So we'll be able to maybe designate some of those funds to go into mental health if necessary. That's another approach that we can consider. So I think there's ways that we can help to shore this up. And once again, it's going to take more than just Nate Miley saying it. It's going to take the will of 2 other supervisors so that we have 3 of us at least saying that. And if it comes to a budgetary situation, it requires a vote of 4.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very concerned that Prop 1 is likely to pass. And I think Prop 1, because it takes money from our current services, is problematic. We absolutely need more mental health resources and more mental health services. And we need housing. But I think Prop 1 isn't the answer to housing. I think Prop 1 is the answer to psychiatric housing. If it did that without taking money from the mental health system, I would support it. And if we do lose that funding, right now we have $156 million of ARPA money, which is the, I'm trying to think of the acronym, but forgive me, it's escaping me at this moment. ARPA money came after COVID from the federal government. And to have and we got way more than 156 million. That's just the remaining funds that has not been obligated and not been allocated. So I would want that ARPA money to be spent right now enhancing our mental health services, to be making sure that we have wraparound programs that are being developed so that we could be prepared. Because if Prop 1 happens, we're going to lose funding. And there's no reason we should let that money go back to the federal government. People were super angry when they found out that the city of Oakland missed an opportunity for $17 million. We're talking about 10 times that amount that the county currently has to spend, but has been dragging their feet on. I think also we have to think about money that currently exists within the system. Looking for new funding is complicated, and tapping into our reserves may not be the best fiscal solution. So I don't think supervisors would actually vote for it. I don't know that I would vote for it, but with half of our jail population having a mental health diagnosis and knowing that 25,000 people are cycling in and out of our jail every year, 12,000 of them spending less than a week in jail, because jail is not prison. People are coming back to the community. We need to make sure we invest in diversion programs. That ARPA money could be doing that. And then we will save, because when you move people in and out of jail, you're paying for the car, the gas, the deputies, the clothing, the food. Let's divert people. Not every one of those 12,000 is going to be eligible, but enough are that we'll have funding.
Okay. I'm getting distracted. You've both answered that one question, right? Okay, perfect. Good. So I'm going to change the subject here. I'm going to talk about climate change. So as a nation, our goal is to cut climate warming emissions in half over the coming 6 years. What can and should the county, and therefore the Board of Supervisors, do as part of this effort?
So many things. So many things. The climate emergency is real. And unfortunately, we are a bit behind the eight ball. You know, there's a study done that says that 70% of all emissions in this county come from cars. So I think if we want to have the biggest impact, we need to get cars off the road. And the best way to do that is to have bus service increase, clean energy buses that also are resourced from clean renewable energy. In this community, you guys are probably well aware that the students who go to Skyline High almost lost their bus service just a couple years ago. And AC Transit is in the mode of cutting resources yet again for communities that don't have the same population density as the most urban area. So that includes the unincorporated community. Out in Ashland, in Castro Valley, in San Leandro, we are looking at less bus service, which is going to exacerbate the issue. As a county supervisor, you can sit on the AC Transit Board or the Municipal Transit Authority, and you have the responsibility and the authority to have impact on whether or not these cuts in service take place, on whether or not we have an expansion of renewable resources and buses. Because if 70% of our energy or pollution rather is coming from cars on the road, that is the easiest, most low-hanging fruit. And it is really easy and economical to get more buses on the road quickly. I think when it comes to homes, we can also make sure that zoning and planning decisions are including green energy. Right now, we've got county plans for housing, the RENA numbers, we've got county plans around energy efficiency, and those plans don't intersect. They weren't created in unison. That has to change. These are plans that are supposed to last for decades. We need to make sure that all of them overlap.
Yes, so real quickly, in terms of ARPA funding, the funding needs to be allocated by 2024, and it needs to be spent by 2026. County's not going to have any problem spending the money. It's going to be allocated. We had over $1 billion of requests for ARPA funding to deal with COVID relief and recovery. County, and we need to make sure that when we come to true upping around this, because usually it takes 2 to 3 years for the federal government to true up on these matters, that none of the expenditures are disallowed. So that's one thing, and that's where experience matters. Secondly, in terms of climate change, the county has a climate action plan. We're pursuing that. It looks at addressing greenhouse gases. We need to get vehicles off the road. I serve on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. I serve on the Metropolitan Transportation Commission through the Air District. We've done shore power where we've electrified so that ships could hook up to the shore. We've done things to try to deal with drayage trucks and equipment at the port to improve air quality. We're constantly looking at ways that we can get vehicles off the road. A big project that I'm leading in Alameda County is Valley Link. It's a light rail that'll come in from San Joaquin County into Alameda County. It'll take a lot of cars off the road that come over to Altamont and improve air quality and alleviate congestion. The county's looking at additional measures relative to adaptation and resilience. That is important relative to climate change. We recognize that this is a very important issue that needs to be addressed. It's probably, I think, other than public safety, one of the most important priorities that we need to be working on. And I've been diligent in pursuing my responsibilities relative to addressing climate change. We have a 617 community that in East Oakland and in West Oakland that targets challenged communities that have experienced poor air quality, so that we can address that in those marginalized communities as well. So those are things that we're doing through the county. Thank you.
Thanks. So we're going to move back to talking about the budget. So what are the most important decisions before the Board of Supervisors in the next 4 years, especially focusing on the budget issues? And what are your priorities for that?
Well, one of the most important decisions is when I got on the board, the deficit that we had was about 7 to 10 million, but it's grown over the years. At one point, it was up over 100 million. Typically, over the last few years, it's been around 50 million. So we always have to balance the budget. And what is challenging is when the state has problems. And we know the state has like a $70 billion budget deficit. The state typically will balance its budget on the backs of counties and cities. So we always have to be cognizant of that so that we don't have layoffs, so that we don't have a diminution in services, so that we're prepared to deal with that. Whereas other counties typically have not been as fiscally responsible as we have in order to deal with unanticipated budget crises and concerns. I was on the Oakland City Council when we had a big budget shortfall back in the 1990s, and we had to address that. There are any number of strategies that we look at in terms of trying to address budget deficits, and that's really important. We need to continue to look at remote work. That's something that employees are looking for that can save us money in terms of staffing. Well, and the fact that we have vacancies, that's because we've budgeted for so many, but we're considering reducing the number of vacancies because we don't need that number of staff. So that's another budget situation that we're contemplating and considering. So those are some of the factors that we'll continue to look at. We have very good relations with our lobbyists in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento that work with us on these matters, as well as our delegations in Sacramento, as well as in Washington, D.C., so that we can anticipate that. Supervisor Carson, who chairs our budget committee and has worked on this stuff, provides that leadership. But once again, we're losing him, so we'll lose that leadership. But we still will have the county administrator help us there. Thank you.
So,
Thank you. When I think about the next 4 years, I think about the federal election that's coming in November and who might be our president. And I think about severe austerity that is likely to happen. I think about abortion being abolished nationwide and what that means for people. I think about immigration and what we may have. There's so many burdens that may come our way and so many responsibilities. In addition to the current crisis we're already in around people being unhoused and around the need for so much care in our communities. Measure C, so first of all, we need to spend that ARPA money. And truing up is fine, but $156 million needs to be allocated and needs to be obligated, and we need to do it already. Experience tells me when you have money, figure out how to use it. Measure C also gives us an opportunity to spend $500 million on childcare supports and on supporting working families with children. And right now, the Measure C money is being held up because of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association fighting it in court. But the judges have made some decisions and some indications that say they're probably going to rule in our favor, which is very good because half $500 million for childcare means that we can be ensuring that the people who do the work in the childcare industry can have living wage jobs. It means that people who rely on childcare assistance, I used to be in that boat. When I was a nursing student, I relied on childcare assistance. It's how I got to this place I am today. It means that we can fund those programs, we can fund them well, and people in our community can be productive and go to work. I think that we have to ensure that we also are using our funds well. I mentioned audits before and making assessments. I think that is key because we have to be good fiscal stewards of the resources we have currently. Nobody likes new taxes. I don't want to talk about new taxes. I want to talk about being responsible for what we have to work with today.
Other than making every unincorporated area part of some city, how is it possible to avoid the incorporated versus unincorporated boundary disputes that we're seeing?
I think this is a great question. I think, our unincorporated community has had some time over the years where we've seen resources taken away. When I say resources, I mean tax revenue. Like the wholesale Costco, the business Costco that used to be in Hayward Acres is now part of the city of Hayward. Bayfair Mall used to be a part of Ashland, now it's a part of the city of San Leandro. Those are revenue sources that were once a part of a certain community and got shifted to another. I think when we utilize a scarcity mindset tends to pit communities against one another. And frankly, with a $4 billion county budget, there is no scarcity, but we have to think about allocations. Additionally, we had a pretty fair conversation about zip code realignment last year. And I think that the zip code realignment opportunity is not gone, but was punted because the zip code realignment would have given us an opportunity to have not just the name of our town match on our driver's license and on our mail, but it would have given us an opportunity for the name of our town and our zip codes to match. And it would have given us an opportunity. What those zip codes mean is that the federal government, the census tracts, the health department, the statistics by which federal dollars come into our community would match the actual lived experience of our community. And when the federal money comes based on health outcomes, right now, we think that the people in Ashland and the people in San Leandro have the same health outcomes because we have one zip code, but we know that's not true. Same thing in Cherryland. We have different incomes, we have different experiences, we have different populations, but we can't really sort through the data easily because the zip codes don't match. We had a grand opportunity last year to make the zip codes match and to really allow our federal reimbursements to match the locations, but we flubbed that.
Thank you.
Yeah, before I answer that question, I'm gonna go back to the financial one too, because also you need to understand the county has a retirement program, and we have to put dollars into our retirement system. We also put dollars into providing healthcare for retirees. We're not required to do that, but we do that as well. And each year we have to make sure there's ample resources going into ACERA, that's the county's retirement system, to ensure that people are receiving their retirement benefits as well as healthcare. In addition, the county's capital improvement program or plan, it's about $1 billion underfunded. So we need to be looking at that. So we're always looking to see how we can balance all these things to ensure our success and maintain our financial stability. So I think that's part of the projection going forward into the future. Now, in terms of the unincorporated area, I serve on LAFCO, which is the Local Area Formation Commission. And through LAFCO, we did a study. We looked at whether or not the entire unincorporated area could be incorporated. We looked at annexations because Cherryland could be annexed by Hayward. Ashland could be annexed by San Leandro. So we looked at that as well. And you can't move ahead with any of this stuff unless the voters in the particular jurisdictions want to see that happen. So I'm all for whatever the people in those communities want to see happen, but I've restricted or I've resisted any cherry picking by our adjacent cities because often they've taken the best parts and left the worst for the county to deal with, which has produced a problem. Additionally, we can look at business improvement districts. We can look at community service districts. We can look at other mechanisms that would help to improve the quality of life. We can look at area planning commissions that would give more authority to the unincorporated area folks when it comes to decision making. So there's an ample menu of possibilities. Zip code realignment is just one of those things on the menu.
So this is a diverse district in a whole lot of ways: education, wealth, race, whatever. County supervisors also work with a whole wide variety of stakeholders. So how do you balance the needs of your District 4 constituents with the overall needs of the county? And what skills do you have that help reconcile all these divergent interests?
Well, the way I do that is I'm constantly at meetings. I make myself available. I require my staff to do the same thing. We don't treat any part of our district better than any other part of our district. Oakland, unincorporated area, or Pleasanton. I've got offices in all three parts of my district. I also have good relationships with the elected officials there. The entire Pleasanton City Council and the mayor have endorsed me. The chamber in Pleasant has endorsed me. The police and fire have endorsed me. So that I work that way. Here in Oakland, the chamber has endorsed me. The three council members who represent the district that I have, they've endorsed me. We meet with them all constantly as well. So we're constantly out there doing that. I go to meetings in the unincorporated area. When I started in the unincorporated area, there was a dearth of community-based organizations. We've built up the fabric of the community so that there's a strong infrastructure there of community-based organizations. RCD, for instance, wasn't there. We built up DSAL. We're continuing to support DSAL so it can deliver services. So those are the things I make myself available. My kids, when they were growing up, the people would ask them, "What's your dad do?" Well, he goes to meetings. I was a professional community organizer. I came from law school here to California to work in the community, organizing folks, going door to door, working in the community. I often use that experience to have my office serve as a place from which we are proactive, doing things. We're just not reactive, waiting for things to come to us. That's how we stay in contact. That's why I've got the support of so many community-based organizations, community residents, faith-based organizations, faith leaders, elected leaders, organized labor, business leaders, because they recognize not only do I get things done, but I have a proven and successful track record. I listen, I observe, and I'm deferential.
Thank you. Yeah, stakeholder engagement is crucial. I think, as we're talking about public safety a little while ago, the question was raised, why did the city of Oakland go all the way to the governor and not come to the county? When we talk about support in the community, I think that's what I heard is actually missing. The people of the community are looking for some different kind of representation. Every community group that has made an endorsement in this race has endorsed me. Every Democratic club in this district has endorsed me. And people are clear. They want our youth centers to be open on weekends. They want our youth centers to be open in the evening. DSAL, we heard so many parents worried sick in the last several months about DSAL losing funding for programs that engage our youth, that keep the communities active and feel like they are invested in. In order to make sure that stakeholders countywide and stakeholders in this district feel like they are getting what they deserve, it requires more than just attending meetings. It actually requires addressing people's needs. Listening to people is great. Taking action based on their needs is even better. And I think people are getting tired of having lip service with no action. One of the things that I did, one of the last things I did in the Alameda Health System as vice president was partner with my president of the board so that we could have a joint meeting with stakeholders. And this is an example of what I'll do as county supervisor. We met with members of the Homelessness Commission, the Mental Health Board, Native American Health Center, and even Lena Tam came to our meeting, and members of the incumbent staff came as well. And people who'd worked in the county for decades said that they had never been in this room in this kind of configuration. And the reason we brought all those stakeholders together is because when we want to make our community health, it requires paying attention to mental health, housing, and physical health. And that's the kind of collaboration it takes countywide.
So Alameda County ended the moratorium on evictions that was in place during the pandemic. What can be done to help those who have lost their housing or are at risk of losing their housing, and how would you pay for it?
Oh yeah, this is a big one. The eviction moratorium ended in July, but several months before, in February, we had the opportunity to pass a suite of tenant protections that could have prevented some of the evictions from occurring. I think people who are at risk need to be protected. That's what the county's job is. It's to provide services to those who are most at risk and most in need. And since then, we've seen so many thousands of families with children be evicted. We even saw people in mobile home communities in Castro Valley at risk because their rents were doubling. And in the unincorporated community where we don't have tenant protections, people's rents have doubled in the last 5 years. That's very costly. If you're someone whose wages aren't doubling, I don't know whose wages are doubling in the last 5 years, but when your cost of living is doubling, that means it's really hard to keep up. I would absolutely make sure that those ARPA funds are used to start some pilot programs to help people have stipends. The University of California in San Francisco did a study last year about the state of homelessness in California. And they discovered that the difference between people staying housed and losing their housing can be as little as $3 to $500 a month. That feels like it's not that much, but for people who have very little income, that's their whole world. And for people who are precarious and living on the edge, that is the difference between being housed and unhoused. And I think that our county can fill in the gap between where people's earnings are and where people need to make ends meet. You know, universal basic income pilots have really been successful all around this county and around the country to help people get out of poverty. We saw this with the child tax credit, $300 a month people were getting, and it meant that children were no longer starving. We can absolutely help to support our community. We can do it right now. We don't have to wait to get a vote. We don't have to wait for a bond measure to pass, and people need it today.
Yes. Our social service agency is about $1 billion agency as well. So our healthcare agency is about $1 billion. Our social services agency is $1 billion. Now, if we go with guaranteed income, that's going to be an additional burden on the taxpayers because ultimately somebody's going to have to pay for that. I just want to point that out. So keep that in mind. Next of all, I think can you just give me the question again? Because I want to make sure I answer it precisely.
So we ended the moratorium on
Yeah,
evictions
okay.
and what can be done to help those who lost their housing?
The eviction moratorium, I felt the board passed an overextensive eviction moratorium. And I felt the consequences of that, you know, the chickens were going to come home to roost if we didn't act on that. And unfortunately, we didn't, and the chickens came home to roost. We have provided and we're continuing to provide rental assistance, which is very important in terms of helping tenants stay housed. We are providing shallow subsidies so that folks can remain housed. That's important. We are working with both tenant organizations as well as rental property providers so we can come up with balanced policies and approaches so that tenants and folks can stay housed. We're looking at a rental registry. We're looking at provisions relative to just cause. We're looking at coming up with, and we're actually doing it, inspections as well. Those are things. We're looking to build more housing. It's important that we don't pit one group against another because I hate polarization, whether it's from the extreme left or the extreme right. So we need to look at balanced approaches. We put in $30 million in the unincorporated area with COVID funding.
So Alameda County has the lowest average income in the Bay Area, but the county also has the highest combined sales tax in the state, which is 10.25% in many cities and up to 10.75% in some. By comparison, Santa Clara County's rate is 9.125, so below the 9%. Is it possible to reduce the tax burden on Alameda County residents? And what would be the cost of that?
Is it possible? I'm sure everything is possible. The electorate has voted to, you know, for these various sales tax measures when they've gone on the ballot. So whether it's measure A1, whether it's measure A, whether it's measure W, whether it's measure C, the electorate has voted for these various measures. So once again, and then we've gone to the state legislature too to see if we could get the increment raise for the sales tax, and the legislature has given us permission to do that. So I'm sure anything's possible in terms of reducing the burden. I think ultimately to reduce the burden, we need to reform Proposition 13, and we need to be taxing businesses so that they're paying their fair share, corporations so that they're paying their fair share, because the reason we have all these various initiatives from special districts, cities and counties is because of Proposition 13. And it goes back to that. And it's a constant sort of a struggle. So we need to have that type of reform throughout the entire state. At one point, I was involved with an effort to amend the state constitution. So we could be looking at ways to provide a more stable funding mechanism throughout the state for local governments, special districts, as well as the state. That didn't really go very far, but I was engaged in that as well as looking at the initiative approach. So what we find ourselves in is a real big predicament that no one city or jurisdiction or county can solve on its own. It's going to take the collaborative effort of both our local officials as well as our officials in Sacramento to help us with that. So once again, I think we can reduce it. Anything's possible, but none of this happens without the electorate approving.
Yeah, that actually you surprised me with that. Lowest income, highest sales tax. That feels intense. That, it's like, wow. Reducing the tax burden is something that is complicated. And I'm really glad to hear about Prop 13 reform coming from the incumbent, because I think corporations do not pay their fair share. That's something we all agree on. It's good to know. A lot of tax measures have an expiration date, and some of them could potentially expire, and maybe we could let them go. Tax measures that support public health, we've heard the incumbent talk about that being incredibly relevant and necessary. But I think we have to think about the system and the money that we currently have and how we can allocate it in ways that benefit us most. We have to make real transparent assessments. I can't stop saying we need to audit our contractors. We need to make sure that we are auditing. We have a county auditor who is elected. She does a great job. And sometimes you need a second set of eyes. And we need a second set of eyes to be looking at whether or not we are getting what we expect from county contractors and county agencies. Over and over again, we've heard about these big agencies with big budgets. We've got $1 billion budget for the criminal legal system. We've got $1 billion budget for the health services agency. We've got a $1.4 billion budget in the Alameda health system. And from my work at the health system, I know that we are trying really hard to make things efficient and effective. And when you're running a staff shortage, when you are utilizing contractors, when you are creating a deficit in your pension contributions by using outside contractors and not using your staff who would be paying into the pension, you are giving yourself long-term issues and long-term liabilities that you are not funding in the present term. Penny wise and pound foolish. I think we can use a different kind of math than we're currently using.
So I'm looking at the time. This is going to be our last question. We're going to get it first. So the county has funds from city, county, state, federal sources, all of which are designed to address supportive housing, affordable housing, and services. What kind of program ideas are there for both maximizing the effectiveness of these multiple funding streams and trying to get them to work together?
Yeah, I think that this has been kind of the theme of the evening is like, how do we get the maximized spending, the maximized efficiency and effectiveness? And the county's mandate is to provide housing and homelessness services to make sure that we have social services agencies that are fully funded. And, I will repeat one more time that ARPA money is sitting out there. And that is an example of not utilizing the resources that we have available. I think that one-time money should be spent on one-time programs. And if we're going to do pilots that we think can make a big impact, then we should do pilots around making sure that people in need of housing supports can get stipends. And that also could then be used as a recruitment and retention bonus for local employers who need high-level workers who can afford housing, but maybe need assistance with their down payment so they could buy a house and become a taxpayer. Because frankly, if we give somebody down payment assistance, we should obligate them to live here for 10, 15, or 20 years so that we can recoup the money. How good would that be to spend one-time money and then see a return on that investment from our local taxpayers who are also then providing services in the community? I think that there's a lot of creative approaches that we can take to utilizing the funds on hand and to make sure that we get a return on our investment. Last year, California, for the first time in history, had more people leaving the state than moving in. We had an out-migration. You can also say that another way. We had a brain drain. Our community members, my kids are college age, they're 18, 19, and 22. When they finish college, will they feel like they have the quality of life here that they want? Will they feel like they can afford to live here? Or will they choose some other place that they want to live? That means that our talent that we are our homegrown talent is going elsewhere to utilize those talents. That means that we as a community lose. That's why we have these staffing shortages. And when we take care of our community takes care of us.
Smiley.
Yeah, so I just want to repeat once again with the ARPA funding, it's got to be allocated by the end of this year and spent by 2026. And the county has always done its job. Now, in terms of fiscal matters, we have a federal government, county, and a state government. Counties are arms of the state. We have mandated responsibilities. Of our $4 billion budget, only about 500 million is discretionary. The rest is categorical. So if the federal government and the state gives us funding, and if they don't give us funding, or if they make cuts, the county either has to make cuts or figure out we're going to make that up. So that's why we're constantly looking at our fiscal stability. We used to get more money for coordinated entry. That's around trying to provide services for housing and the unsheltered. We don't get that same level of funding. There used to be revenue sharing. We don't get that type of funding any longer. So we look at entrepreneurial government. That was something that was done back in the 1990s or so. So we could see how government could be more entrepreneurial. That's why county governments went out and city governments went out to see how they could offer services. We have contracts, for instance, like with AC Transit. We're looking to see how we can provide similar services in downtown Oakland. For instance, we have property in downtown Oakland that we're utilizing with nonprofits to provide housing. So there's things that we're constantly trying to look at to see how we can come up with additional dollars without having to go to the electorate for additional revenue. But once again, understanding government at the local level, the state level, and the federal level, it's a complex mixture of funding streams, funding sources, and different funding buckets cannot necessarily be mixed, but we can try to utilize those buckets to the best of our ability.
Thanks. So now I'm going to invite each candidate to make a 2-minute closing statement, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Miley.
Yeah, so once again, I want to thank Pastor Lori and Skyline and everyone else, you, Helen, for moderating, and everyone who came together to sponsor this, bringing this together. Appreciate everybody in the audience and those watching remotely. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. When you ask what people think, ask these 100 or so folks who have talked about why they're supporting Nate Miley, regular citizens. They've provided testimonies why they're supporting me. When you wonder why organized labor is supporting me, the California Nurses Association, when you ask why SEIU 1021, SEIU United Healthcare Workers, when you ask why the firefighters, when you ask why law enforcement, when you ask why the Attorney General, why are they supporting me? Because they know I get things done. They know I have a successful track record. They know I have responsible, proven service of delivery. They know that I'm not lazy. They know that I'm not sloppy. They know that my staff and I are constantly working to build relationships and to deliver services. If I could take a magic wand and make everything perfect overnight, trust me, I would. But you can't. And this is not a sprint. It's a marathon, and it's a building blocks. And I've done that constantly over the years when I was on the Oakland City Council, and then taking that same experience to the Board of Supervisors, building that. And you don't work in a vacuum. Work with your colleagues. And if you get your colleagues out of sort with you, then you won't have their support on some other important issue that you're trying to move through the governmental process. So there's a lot of different components in trying to make government responsive and to work here in Alameda County and throughout the region. And I have those relationships. I have that experience. I have that institutional knowledge. I have that know-how that I think would serve the electorate very well for another term. Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with community once again in person, and I look forward to having one more chance virtually next Thursday night when we have the Oakland Rising Forum be over Zoom. So if you haven't had enough, join us again. Thank you, Supervisor Miley, for participating. Thank you to the Skyline Church and to everyone who is here tonight. It really is a big endeavor to imagine our leadership for the next 4 years, to imagine the future of our community and the direction we are headed. We know where we've come from, we know where we are, and I think we know where we want to go. And I think we're at a bit of a crossroads right now in this county and with our community. People are unhoused, poverty is increasing, out-migration is real. We absolutely have to have some different approaches to these problems. If we continue doing the same thing, we will have the same results. And one of the questions that came to mind over and over again tonight is, what are we waiting for? Why are we kicking the can down the road for the bond measure with 2026? Why are we waiting for the ARPA funds for 2026? Valley Link won't break ground until 2028. We have urgent needs in our community today, and we've given 6 terms, 24 years to the current elected leadership. We know what we are getting. I think a lot of people want change. There are people in the establishment who've been named who enjoy the status quo. But for the members of our community who are having a different experience, we know what they want. There are tens of thousands of community members that we have talked to in my campaign at their doors, on the phone, via text, on the internet, and they have been consistent. It's been enough time. Time's up.
So thank you all for being here tonight, and a special thank you to the candidates. Being in the public eye and being part of this work is demanding, and we all appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you to all the participants here, and both here and online, for your interest in making educated choices. A link to tonight's recorded program will be on the church's website, which is skylineucc.org, sometime tomorrow. Finally, when you get ready to complete your ballot, please do check out vote411.org. It gives you all the background information, the candidates and the ballot measures just for your individualized ballot. Vote411.org is a product of the League of Women Voters. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. My back is